Good morning, everyone. All right, I'm going to review my options trades this morning. Ended up being a red day by one trade. Possibly could have been preventable, but realistically, probably not. Only one of the trades was kind of iffy. The rest were flawless. But let's jump to 1 minute before market open, which is here. And my pre-market analysis is bullish, and it is still bullish. Well, my daily bias is still bullish. You can see that NQ and ES have invalidated a vast majority of this drop here, and there should be a gap there on ES. Oh, it's not a daily gap. This is a daily gap here. So big thing we did gap up. Gaps fill, right? And this is a daily gap on futures. We have a smaller time frame gap on ES. This is a daily gap on futures here, which is a really big deal. You don't see that. But price action is very far away from that. So right now that bias doesn't really play out. Right now we're near this pivot on NQ. ES's pivot's still a decent bit away and somewhat heavy supply until we get there. So I'm just leaning bullish for NQ to get to this pivot. Don't know if it's going to happen this morning. Probably will. Newsflash, it did not. I guess I should say spoiler alert. So anyways, we just opened. And I'm kind of just waiting to try to go long. It didn't really happen though. This candle shot all the way up and went all the way back down. So I'm just continuing to wait. And it's roughly by, not this candle. I thought we may reverse on this candle. It was by this candle, I'm like, okay, I'm bearish, right? Now, after this candle closed and the next candle opened, I genuinely tried to get into QQQ puts. My reasoning was we didn't really have any major support until here. It's not even major support, just between here and here, there's like nothing, right? This is like a minor pivot for me. So I did try to fill QQQ puts, but the next candle opened huge red and I missed my fill. Unfortunately, I did not mark it and enter, and I missed my fill, so that was really unfortunate. I'm like, okay, well, majority of the run is invalidated here, so here are the pivots that I have coming up. And I'm just going to do my best to catch a move down to these pivots. But it's looking like a good morning. Nice and volatile. We're getting good moves. So there's definitely money to be made. Still dumping. I did really consider just kind of, I really just wanted to chase puts, to be honest. But was not really feeling that possibility. So it was on this candle that I finally filled puts. I'm like, all right, I need some kind of bounce, right? Some kind of bounce. Give me a bounce. I'll fill puts. I don't want to buy at the high implied volatility. You guys know how it's been over the last week or so. Really high IV, really choppy contracts. If you don't buy when the IV's, if you buy when the IV's high, it's just gonna, and it's always high, but it's not as high during this bounce. So I filled short. Let me turn off my magnet mode. Roughly here during this candle. You know, it bounced all the way up and then it put in the selling wick and I filled short. So I filled the QQQ puts. Half size though, and I'm looking to average down on a bounce or average up if this bounce invalidates. We get our bounce and I average down on the very next candle, which was beautiful because for some reason the last 15 seconds of this candle it dumped. So now I entered at 84 cents. I filled my second half at 76 cents. I think they dropped to like 71 cents or something. But now I'm just bearish to this next pivot. And it got there. I'm like, well, I'm not going to sell because now I'm bearish to this ES pivot. There's no reason to sell here. Now I have a small reason to trim. So I did trim and I sold most of it when ES hit this pivot, this one right here. But I kept a small position left for the next ES pivot. And I sold the last bit on this bounce. It perfectly swept this pivot right here on ES. We pretty much perfectly swept it on NQ. So this was a really good trade. Now at the peak, I mean, the trade got roughly 70% gains. I averaged about 55% on it. This was a beautiful trade. Beautiful start to the morning. And now, now that that trade is kind of complete, this bias is really starting to kick in. We have a gap to fill on the NQ chart. And again, it's really rare that you have a gap like that, especially on the daily time frame. It's very rare that you have a daily gap. So very much so looking forward to that. So I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive. This is the only red trade that I had today that was like somewhat avoidable, at least if, you know, I wanted to go smaller size, right? But I'm just looking for this bounce to invalidate because I want this demand to break. And then I have a really nice pivot down here, and then we'll be into the gap. So I'm playing a little bit more aggressive now. The trend's really down. And I just got a 55% trade. I filled my QQQ puts a little bit into the next candle here. And I'm just looking for the demand to break. This is beautiful. We bounced, but we got a big selling wick. This is a ton of bearish momentum just coming right back down. Looked pretty good. And my stop loss was roughly here. Unfortunately, I was green, but we swept low of day with a really bullish buying wick. And right when that happened, I said that's a very bullish buying wick. And unfortunately, it played out as a reversal. So stopped out pretty much right as this candle opened for minus 22%, which is fine. You know, minus 22%, that's not a big deal. But when this candle happened, we have now swept the recent high and put in another potential reversal candle. So I'm like, okay, you know, I'll give it another shot if we come back down and invalidate most of the bounce. Well, I'm close to entering here, was very close, but waited for the candle to close or get within a few seconds of closing, and it put in a big selling wick. Sorry, not a selling wick, a buying wick. So I delayed it again. Next candle opened very bearish, but I tried to be patient, not rush in, and it almost baited me in. It put in a buying wick, took my finger off the trigger, and it shot up. I'm like, okay. This is kind of looking like a bear flag, but it's really steep, you know, with it chopping up. It's chopping up very steep, which is suspicious. But you know, now we've swept to this high on NQ, and it looks like we're going to sweep this high on ES. If we come back down, I think it'll have a much higher chance of actually playing out. So ES has now swept the high, so we have higher highs now. I'm kind of just waiting for it to come back down. This is the opportunity. This gap to fill is an opportunity. As I'm saying this right now, the market is dumping again. That gap fill is the opportunity this morning, it looks like. So I'd watch that if you guys are currently trading. We end up dropping, and I actually fill on SPX calls here. I'm like, all right, I'll take one more attempt at it. One more attempt. Filled the SPX calls. It completely invalidated, sorry, not SPX calls, SPX puts. Completely invalidated that really big green candle, and it's now weaker than NQ. NQ didn't even invalidate the body of the green candle yet. So this was a solid trade, giving it another shot. Unfortunately, right away I noticed the put started chopping really bad. So that was a red flag. Unfortunately, I ended up stopping out. We got yet another buying wick, and on this candle I said, what exactly did I say? I said, price action looks terrible right now. Now it's bullishly chopping downwards. You can stop early if you want. This is bullish chop, but I'm going to let it hit stop loss personally, because I thought this was probably going to be my last trade. Sure enough, right after I say that, breaks to the upside. I stop out on this candle. 2 losses in a row. Now that loss was minus 26%. So I'm still small green on the day. It sucks that I started off this morning with such an awesome green trade, and then I just got nothing afterwards. But you know, the trades were good. This second loss had to get in. It was a pretty decent trade. The first trade, the only difference I could have done is maybe entered half size and then averaged down when it made the higher high, but I could have easily just averaged up right after I got into, because it did fully invalidate that bounce. So that's kind of the only adjustment that I possibly could have made. But that's such a small technical that's like, you know, everything's always going to seem doable in hindsight, but in reality, it's just not super probable that I make that decision every time. So I stopped out early here. Now I'm only up by like five, like 7% of one trade. I'm like, all right, I'm probably gonna call it unless I get something crazy. Like unless this just starts skyrocketing to the upside. Now I have a good momentum trade to this high to supply, or you know, we sweep this and then plummet downwards. There's no news today, there's no news today, which is probably a reason for this drop. So maybe I'll take one more. We'll have to see. But the thing is, looking back on price action, I really could have taken a call trade here. Would it have gone anywhere? Not for the first bit because it did all this chopping. But this was a decent call entry here. I mean, you were in demand, you made a lower low, and you had this pivot. But the problem was because these gaps are so rare and this is driving my bias, I'm not going to sit out of this put opportunity here, especially when this demand is this small, you know. So, if this gap wasn't here, I don't think I would have entered put. Well, I know I wouldn't have entered these puts here. I wouldn't have been quite as aggressive because this is a double demand zone, and I potentially could have entered calls for the reversal trade out of demand here. But with the gap there, that's just never going to happen. That gap should always dictate your bias whenever you're in decent proximity of that gap, because futures gaps fill. But anyways, we start skyrocketing the upside. I'm like, okay, we finally broke to the upside out of this choppy range. We started off super bearish. We started off with great trend. Now we chopped. The chopping was pretty steep, which was kind of a red flag, but the gap kind of overrode that. And now we're really breaking to the upside. This looks pretty good. So, by the way, this supply was not showing for me when I was trading this live. Let me actually check this. Yeah, this supply should have been showing for me live. But anyways, once this selling wick invalidated, I took one more trade. I'm like, all right, I'll take one more trade. We're trending really hard. If this selling wick invalidates, I'll be in. Once it started invalidating, I filled SPX calls here. Was back to being stronger than NQ, it looked like. Decent stop loss, nothing crazy. Looking for one last trade, see if I can catch a move to this side. Looks good. This is pretty much the same trade that I took this morning, just the opposite direction. I stopped out on right at the beginning of this candle. On the next candle, it came back to where I stopped out, but I ended up stopping out for 26%. So now I'm down on the day roughly 120% trade. Like, well, I'll call it there. Even though, you know, ES looks like it's in a pennant, and it looks like it may now want to break to the downside and finally get there. I'm unwilling to give up another loss. This is a very small red day. I'm red by 120% trade. It's unfortunate that today started so good and then I just got nothing afterwards, but it happens. You just have to retain perfect psychology and move on. But yeah, I'm just unwilling to lose more money, because if I'm unwilling to lose more money on this price action, I'm unwilling to spend more money to find out if these trades are going to be green or not. And I decide to enter puts here or wait for the breakout in here. Well, if I stop out, does that mean I'm also going to want to chase that back now and enter calls up here for the break to the upside? And then if I stop out of that, then I have a hole to dig myself out of. And I don't want to feel like I have a hole to dig myself out of. So, yeah, I stopped trading there. And it did pretty much that. I mean, would have lost money on puts here. I wouldn't have trimmed here, that's for sure. NQ didn't even get to this low. Potentially could have made money on calls here. Probably wouldn't have trimmed. Maybe trade would have ended up red. So if I kept trading, I would have had two more red trades, and that's just the way this morning's went. No pivot swept except during the first trade. So didn't make any money besides the first trade. And yeah, we just started out just really in this range this morning. And whenever we have range bound opens or choppy opens, I'm never going to make money, and that's just kind of the way it goes. Which doesn't matter as long as market opens like this, to where it's just super choppy and there's not much opportunity. As long as those opens are rare, I don't care that they happen. But now it looks like this gap is going to start. It looks good for new low of day at the moment on NQ. Looks like it had some very nice supply rejections. This was a nice liquidity sweep. Looks like the second hour of today is going to be and is being a lot better than the first hour, which is unfortunate for me, but it just kind of happens. But that was my morning's. That was my morning options trading. Hopefully, futures will be green today. We'll find out though in the live trading um, at 1:30 Eastern or 10:30 my time Pacific. But with that being said, does anyone have any questions regarding any of the trades I took this morning? And while you guys are typing, if you guys are typing, next week I'm going to be gone on vacation the entire week. When I am back, I'm still seeing kind of issues with the options trading in the mornings. Last week was a mix. I ended up like small green last week. I had to sit out one of the days because it was just so volatile and options weren't moving. And the premiums have just been really far out still. And it seems like the general implied volatility on options contracts are still cooling. So I expect by the time I'm back from vacation, really by early next week, we should be back to our regularly scheduled programming, options trading wise. Um, but this morning doesn't seem like a bad morning for futures unless you got caught up in the chop. Rikai says, "Would you see justification to have entered the first trade one or two candles earlier?" I tried entering, Rikai. You missed that part. Yeah, so I tried entering. Once this drop happened, I'm like, I'm bearish to here. And then beyond that, I'm gonna continue to be bearish. I did genuinely try entering here. I missed my fill, which is pretty upsetting, but it just happens. So by that point, I had to wait for a bounce, which means if I didn't get that small bounce, I would have missed that entire move, and I would have just gone 0 for 3 today, which really would have been not fortunate, but yeah. But yeah, so futures, I will see you guys later today. Hopefully, options is nicer. I think that's 2 red mornings in a row. Friday was red as well. Small red though. It's all about managing your risk. Um, if you're past the stage of blowing your options portfolio every time you get 2 red days in a row, I'm thinking about monthly and yearly P&L. I don't care that 2 weeks out of my year or a few weeks out of my year are going to be flat, right? As long as I'm not exposing myself to any major psychological deterioration or any unnecessary risk, I'm just really limiting my days right now. I'm limiting my green days. Once I'm up by 3 trades or 2 really big ones, I'm done. And if I'm down by 1 to 2 red trades, maybe 3 if I go 0 and 3. But typically, if I'm just down by 1 red trade or 2, that's fine. I'm keeping my red days able to be invalidated by just 1 medium to small green day, and I'd recommend you guys do the same. Ryan says only down 700 on futures today, but my drawdown is cooked 3 losses in a row. I'm sorry to hear that, dude. How much drawdown do you have left, Ryan? 500? Yep, that is unfortunate. You still have some people typing. I'll let them type. Other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it. The supply and demand indicator has been pretty good lately. It just does good on choppy days. Um, I haven't been trading a lot of supply and demand lately at open. I would have, but I'm unwilling to go short here because I'm technically still bullish for this high, and I'm unwilling to buy here because of this gap. If this gap wasn't here, this morning would have been different. But what I'm hoping is that by the time futures rolls around, and it pretty much every time I say this, it happens 30 minutes after I say it, and I don't get to trade it. But hopefully by this afternoon, futures can do something like this. Something like this, and I enter shorts here and get to play it to here. That would be pretty cool. Or vice versa. I would love for, it would be phenomenal if we came like this. And then I enter a long trade for this pivot here, which was my pre-market analysis. So we'll see. I think this morning is kind of setting up for the afternoon futures trading. We got some solid pivots in play right now. As long as we don't just start trending really hard one direction for the rest of the day, I am hopeful about today's futures trading. Yeah, live trade and premium JBS, but the live trading is only happening Wednesday through Friday at the moment. By the way, that's the next thing I was gonna update you guys. So I'm still for you premium people, I'm not gonna be live today, but I'm still gonna tell you guys when I'm in my trade. And JBS, if you're not aware, my futures trading, I take one, maybe two trades a day, and they're like an hour long, 2 hours long. So it's a completely different style of trading. That is a very bearish supply retest on NQ. That looks pretty good to get to demand. Um, but yes, I'll let you guys know when I'm in my futures trade, and I'll just see what happens. I'm not going to ping you guys in futures chat though, so at 1:30 ish, you know, I'll be active in futures chat. But that was the update. After I'm back from vacation, the live futures trading will be happening every day now. I've just been doing Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to kind of slowly get back into the groove of live futures trading. Um, when I'm back, not next week, but the week after, I'll be live futures trading every single day, Monday through Friday in premium. But keep in mind, for those of you who haven't attended, it's boring. Like these trades are huge. They're on the 5 minute time frame. Uh, on Friday's futures trades, it was green. I entered the trade. In the first 5 minutes, it skyrocketed up 150 points near my PT and then chopped back down the entire time. And then the market liquidated me 3 hours later for plus 700 per account, unfortunately. Um, so sometimes the trades just take forever, and I'm not talking the entire time either. Like if there's nothing to do or talk about, I am laying on my couch, hanging out on my phone, doing whatever. So it's a much slower pace style of trading. But all right, I will see you guys later. You guys have a blessed rest of your day. Good luck if you continue trading, and if I don't see you later, um, yeah, have a great rest of your day. Otherwise, we do have a study session after market close in premium, and we are going to be doing quite a bit of new things in this server coming up here soon, like a lot. Um, so I'm gonna be very active this week, and then when I get back, I'm gonna start implementing a lot of the new stuff that I've been working on, and I'm starting on a very big project, which will not just greatly benefit this server, but I think it'll greatly benefit all trading Discord servers. And that's going to be like a 2 month build. Very expensive build, but that'll be like a 2 month development. But keep you guys updated. But all right. Good luck if you guys continue trading. Hopefully, futures is green today. Knock on wood, of course. And I'll see you guys in the study session after market close. If you guys need anything, feel free to reach out. I owe a bunch of you guys money from the last giveaway. I'll get to those DMs today. All right. I'll see you guys later.